Howdy, everybody. Welcome to Highly Questionable Marketing. Season 2? I think we're still trying to do episode 2. I don't know. We've been having some really deep discussions, and I've really been enjoying it. And I really see this podcast as a place for us to really dissect what we think, but hopefully help other marketers and growth leaders and even executives and stuff, like, just think about things differently, because we're just out here openly thinking in the open, right? This is for us to think and get our thoughts straight and learn how to articulate them around this false struggle and what this really means. And after we did episode 1 and really thinking about it and really kind of had this epiphany moment a little bit, is like, what's the root cause of the false struggle? And you're going to see probably a lot more passion, at least from me, this episode, because I just really believe now as I talk to people how much of a big issue this is, and so many people don't even see it. And it's this idea that the false struggle for me really starts with an understanding of how your company grows. And the reason I say that is I think a lot of companies haven't sat down to actually figure out how they grow. When we talk about this throwing shit against the wall mindset, that is really what's happening still. Is they're just building product features over here. They're hiring sales over here. They're hiring marketing people. And everybody kind of has their own vision for how we actually grow. And nobody at the company has actually sat down for a second and said, how does this thing actually grow? What does that look like besides just sales kind of doing some shit over here? Marketing's doing shit. They get aligned on pipeline. So marketing, go get some stuff for sales to call. And then products building some features over here. And it's like, the very definition of the false struggle for me is companies are not understanding how they actually grow, so they continually just throw shit against the wall.
So, yeah, that's powerful. I'll take 2 things I've observed in many of my failures. One is people high up in companies believe that they do know how they're going to grow because they have models. They have economic models and corresponding budgets, and they have numbers and spreadsheets, and they have all this stuff, and they feel like they have kind of architected and mapped it out. Yeah, so we're going to get this much from over here. We're going to get this much from over here. This is going to come together here. This is how this quarter then looks. But that does not answer the question, well, how really is growth going to happen? What is truly the definition of your growth strategy? So just want to kind of call that out for anybody who's listening. It's like, well, no, but companies spend a lot of time on this stuff. And yeah, there's a lot of time on planning and modeling and budgeting, etc. But I think one of the things we're trying to say here is that doesn't mean that you know truly how your company is going to grow, right?
Yeah, and maybe so that's fair, right? Is this, and I appreciate that, which is sure, they're defining things in a spreadsheet format, right? Which is how we're gonna grow is we're gonna hire 10 BDRs, and each BDR needs to get this much pipeline, and we're gonna get 100 meetings, and to get 100 meetings, marketing's gonna kind of do some lead gen shit and some marketing shit, and then we're gonna build new product features, that's not a definition of how a company grows, though, but that's what the executive teams are doing, is they're just creating shit in a vacuum, in a spreadsheet, essentially, and defining it as growth. And maybe even to take it just a little, this might make you think about a little further, which is maybe don't think even about a company level. Take a step back and think about maybe at a product level, defining how the product actually grows, I think is the definition of how do here, I'm gonna give you an example actually as we kind of talk through this quick, right? This is literally today, so it's only 1:00 here in Dallas, Texas. I've had 2 conversations which define to me this false struggle mindset. One, I had a conversation, both of these are actually one of my clients, but it gives you an idea of what goes on internally at these companies, right? They're building product features, right? The executive team straight up, I kid you not, is building these features based on TAMs. They're like, oh, this is a big TAM. We should go get that, because if we can get a small percentage of it, right, we're going to be great. So product is going to do their own shit about how the company thinks they grow. And then marketing is like, well, okay, I guess we're going to kind of do shit to kind of create demand for this new feature, right? And then sales has to kind of do stuff, and they're realizing oh, well, there's no real demand for this, right? As they're going to do this stuff. So, like, that entire how that thing is going to grow was completely done in a vacuum, regardless of what the spreadsheet says. There's no product market fit. And, like, I'll give you another example. This was actually me literally today. It's amazing how the stars align with the fall struggle. And it just kind of reinforces to me as we go through this, like, this is the real struggle that marketing teams are stuck with. They're they're stuck trying to make a company model or growth model work, which is not how they actually should be growing. And that's what's happening, which is here it is, right? Marketing hit 25% above quota, sales is 50% below quota, right? And then what is the company talking about? We need to hire more SDRs, right? And my response to this is your buyers don't experience your core value through sales. And that's your big problem. You're forcing that model that you want to grow with through your business that doesn't fit your model.
Yeah, it's the obsession with playbooks, right? And this is tough because like I do have empathy, right, for founders, executives growing their companies and looking outside, right? Looking for best practices, looking for others that have done this, looking at experts like Jason Lemkin and stuff. Like, surely there's a lot to learn from people who have done great things and turned that into billion-dollar companies. Surely there's a lot to learn. But there's this interesting kind of step there where, yes, learn all that shit. Like, please do. But before you just take it and apply it, you have to pause, right? Like you have to really pause and you have to ask yourself, okay, all that being said, what is the primary way that this is truly going to happen for us, irrespective of all these great playbooks? And I'll give you one more, Jay. This is from my experience, right? So it's not that companies never think about this stuff. In fact, I'd argue a lot of startups, early stage, they actually do define this stuff. Like I was at a company where they decided early on, the founders, said, hey, we're going to grow through content. We're going to go, this is like several years ago. So it's like, we're going to be hardcore SEO content. We're going to pump it out. And that is going to be our, product-led growth type of scenario. And it was just like, this is how we're going to grow. And that lasted and worked for years. Like literally, like not like for 12 months, like for years. Then you get to a point and you're saying, we're going to go up market, so we're building a new product, new version of the product. We're now going to go to a bigger market. And so now we're going to scale. And it's the fucking S word, scale, that I think is kind of triggering this issue in a lot of ways. And I have my own beef with this. I think too many companies try too quickly to scale when they aren't truly ready for it. And being ready for it means several things. We can come back to that another time. But one of those issues around that is that you wanting to just say, okay, we're going to go to the scale playbook. And so we're going to do all this stuff. And you forgetting that moment to say, well, initially we grew this way. Now, in this next phase, how are we going to do it? Because what you end up with is the big model, the big spreadsheet, and then product's going to deliver this, sales is going to do this, marketing is going to ramp up like this, and then you have just a massive amount of tactics. You have your execution plan, you have your numbers that you're mapping against. Oh, and now we can be data driven because we can look at all this shit, and you still haven't answered the fucking question. Yeah. Right? How are we collectively as a company going to come together to secure massive growth for this business? It's not in all that shit we just talked about. The answer isn't in there. The answer is separate. And the answer is around, like, let's simplify, right? It's the combination of strategy and alignment. Yeah. And focus, if you will.
Well, I want to talk about the alignment thing a little bit, but before I do that, because you mentioned, like, right, people read Jason
Of course.
Chris Walker, all that stuff, right? And
Sure. It's
I
all good
kind of
shit.
even today had this epiphany, right? Like that message I got from my customer, right? I mean, we've seen what Chris Walker says, right? Which is marketing, right? Marketing hits pipeline, sales misses. It's a marketing problem, right? And I don't actually believe that anymore. What I've learned is it's not a marketing issue. It's what you said, which is the company doesn't really define how they grow. And really what's happened is they still want a sales led model where marketing's bringing in literally opportunities now, right, to feed them. But
SQOs.
you're speaking correct, right? But you realize when you really break it down is you have to adjust your entire company strategy to align with a marketing driven growth model. And that's not just as easy as saying marketing readjust to get SQOs. Your marketing budget probably needs to be 6 to 8x your sales budget then, right? Like let's have that real conversation, which that doesn't exist. Rarely ever is the marketing budget even as big as the sales budget, let alone 4, 6, 8x more. But on the alignment thing is you can't get aligned until your company defines how you grow because you're all speaking different languages. Like that
Yes.
thing I just told you about, right? Which is sales is like, I want this. Marketing's like, okay, cool, we're gonna do pipeline. Well, here's what I think we're gonna need to do, right? And then product's like, great, so here's what I think we're gonna need to do to hit pipeline. And nobody's actually aligned because while you're looking at the same data and the same spreadsheet, you're all speaking different languages for how you actually drive growth. And that's why even I think in the season 1, like we pushed back on this don't sign up for SQOs and shit because yes, sales is like, oh hell yeah, sign up for that marketing. And if you don't have the growth model to support this, I finally realize this now, like you are literally about to set yourself up as a CMO to get fired. And that's like the issue I think is I realize is there's too much. It's not a bad thing. It's not a negative. It's just we're all speaking different languages because the executive team is kind of like marketing, sales, product, kind of just like figure it out, right? Go like do stuff, and you guys are gonna figure it out, and then we're gonna do more of that stuff. And nobody's like right that focus thing. That's where the focus thing comes to play. Actually, here's how we think we're gonna grow. We're gonna really focus on that, and if your focus is wrong, you're at least more likely to get it right.
Yeah, look, I don't have all the answers about how you come up with your own growth strategy. I'm not that kind of marketer. I
Yeah.
just know that from my own failures, without clarity on that, you are set up to fail in one way or another. So this is just like critical, like for any marketer listening, whether you are able to solve this problem yourself or not, or more accurately, lead your company through solving this problem or not, you're going to have to address it. Again, as we always say, unless you're one of those 0.1% companies that's going to take off no matter what. If you are among the majority of B2B companies, then this is the conversation to have. Like, this is what needs to be figured out.
Yeah.
It,
I
the other shit just doesn't really matter without it.
I think what resonated with me was what you said, and to really just, I think what I'm realizing so much about this false struggle that we keep talking and how we get stuck in tactics is so much of it for a marketing leader kind of sucks, which is so many times, a lot of times, right? An executive's like, well, I just want you guys to go figure that out, right? Like you guys need to figure out how we're gonna grow, right? Like, and I'm realizing now, like, it doesn't work like that because of that language thing. You're speaking different languages to each other until there's a defined definition. So out there, like, and the other reason I'm bringing this up, and maybe we are at a very high levels, I just think this goes back to what we talk about when we read all this shit on LinkedIn, right? And all the stuff that's preached out there and all of these silver bullets and stuff. Like, none of it matters, in my opinion, until you realize this. Like, what we're talking about on this podcast, in this episode to me, is you might get another bump doing that, but will never sustain until you really think about what it's going to take to drive growth. Otherwise, everybody's doing a bunch of tactics. Sales is pounding the pavement, making as many calls as possible, and then marketing's trying to feed them as many leads. And like, like I'm just so passionate about this because like I'm finally at this, in my opinion, aha moment with growth, with marketing, what's blocking it for companies, and what I don't have all the growth answers either. I have only a marketing mindset. But maybe the other angle too, and I'll stop, is gosh, when we said this in the last one, is marketing just gets the short end of the stick for all this stuff every time. Like every time it's viewed as a marketing problem. And I just want people to realize like it might be, but not all of it is.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to what you said about, when leadership kind of says, well, hey, marketing, this area over here is for you to figure out. And on the surface, that sounds fair. On the surface, it actually sounds empowering. But it is the opposite of empowering if there isn't, at least in parallel, a real conversation at the highest level in the company about how we're truly going about this at a high level. And maybe we need to throw out some examples to make this a little more specific, right? Like
Yeah.
what is potentially like one of the ways that you're going to grow that is, let's say, out
I
of the ordinary. I'll go first and just throw out my favorite example in the whole world. Everybody knows what company that I would be referring to here. And this was
jeez.
early days, right?
I'm
So
done with this. No, we're canceling this episode. Turn it off.
you
Done.
love drift. You love drift the most, and you just need to admit it. Hey, check this out though. So this is what is like. This is not the example to follow for everybody, but this is an example of the kind of commitment you would want to make at some point, right? By the way, let me ask you, what do you think really was at the core of Drift's early approach to growth? And I will guarantee that you get it, quote unquote, wrong. In fact,
I, I,
every
I
answer
probably
might be
will
right.
because one, I'm excited about this transition because I think we can, like, we've always talked about trying to make this a little more actionable, right? So I think
Yeah.
this can really help people. So I do actually have an example too I wrote down. So it'll be very interesting. But my mentality would probably be like marketing led with a content playbook is essentially
Simpler,
what they did.
even simpler.
Do it. Tell me.
Hand to hand combat, brick by brick, one person at a time. Truly, think about it. This is $1 billion business now. They
Yeah.
committed, and it's not just doing things that don't scale and other cute sayings like that. It's like, I'm going to appeal to that individual marketer, and I'm going to engage directly with that individual marketer. And I'm
Yeah.
going to do that over again and over again and over again. And that's how you end up with crazy fuckers like myself because of that initial connection to the brand. Even
Yeah.
now, when the brand is something totally different and the company is something totally different, I'll still bring it up. Now, that is one example from early days. A company that's trying to scale, that's not necessarily going to be the example.
Well,
But
let's
yeah, go ahead.
let's give a very recent. So I actually had an example, and I'm actually going to bring it up because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings with this, which is actually Refine Labs, right? Like, because I think it's so clear in the open, but people don't actually get it, which is they latch on to the tactics. Actually, and you realize it, right? How many times do they talk about podcast, start a podcast, do this, right? And then that's what people start to convince themselves they need to do. When I actually look at it and I say, that's not what happened. The company first started to define like how do buyers experience our core value. One, it's through marketing, right? Like that's what they determined. Like, is it going to be through our product? Is it going to be through marketing? Is it going to be through sales? And to me, like they really determined marketing. So to me, that's step one. Two, where was the opportunity that they identified? Like it's content, right? Like podcast aside, by the way, they didn't start with the podcast. Like they really just defined content, right? And then they started to look at it through the lens of cool. So what channels are we going to use? Well, it's social. Like we all see it. We all see what's happening there. And they executed that with laser focus. And now, so let's talk about why this apple and orange thing in different language, right? You have an entire company now that fully understands how that company grows, which is why they're freaking everywhere, which is why they're all doing the same things, which is why that company fully gets how they grow and they can do more of it and scale it and expand it. because they figured out how they actually drive growth.
No.
And that's like to
It's
me the
not,
ultimate
yeah.
example right now that's just probably for most marketers they see and they look at the shiny object thing like podcast video and things like that instead of looking at the strategic level of a company defining how they grow and then executing relentlessly on that.
Yeah, I mean, you have an unfair advantage because of your history with Refined Labs. Let's just
Maybe.
full disclosure here, right, for the listener. But let me just add this too, and I'm saying this because it's not, you know this, probably better than a lot of people, but it was content, but it was combined with a very clear point of view,
Yes.
right? And at a time when that point of view was arguably contrarian,
Yep.
but real ones, knew what was up, right? Like we were like, yeah, yeah, no, that is right, that is right. I think the other thing to mention here, kind of on the flip side of what we're talking about with examples, is like, look, at the end of the day, kind of it ends up being a game of sales, right? We're talking about B2B. So at
Yeah.
some point, somebody's going to sell some shit. So it's not that the kind of like the answer to the question, how truly are you going to grow, that is some outlandish, crazy, you've never really thought of it type of thing. But it is a focused thing that allows your operations to deliver with less pain and inefficiency that they're currently doing, right?
Yep.
I'll give you another example of a company that, will ultimately be $1 billion company, probably like a year or
Elevate
two away from
demand,
that.
probably then. It's got to be what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. How did you know? So they've been around for a few years, well, probably several years by now, doing really well. But every quarter, it's like, boy, how are we gonna hit this goal? Like how are we gonna get there? And they always sort of like they always make it happen, right? But it takes like the sales team and the marketing teams too, like kind of crazy scrambling at the end of every quarter, right? To hit that number. And it's like, whew, all right, let's do it again. And so to me, that is like a clear example of a company that, yeah, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You have a sales team to go get these deals. You're getting the revenue, like you're hitting your goals, you're on track, but you're making it painful for yourself. And you haven't decided on what is that one thing that's going to kind of sit at the core of this whole operation that is actually going to make it easier. Like that's the
Yeah.
way to think about it, right? Like you already have the operations in place and you're doing your thing, but it's fucking painful.
Yep.
And people are getting fatigued and you're just like, "Ah, we got to keep climbing this mountain, guys. Come on, guys, we can do it.
Yeah.
We did the last thing, You know what I mean?
Is
I know you got something you want to come in with, so I'll pause.
Yeah. Is that kind of like the great resignation almost, right? Which I'm aligned with that thinking, which like when we talk about and like by the way, like we talk about this false struggle, I'm convinced this is how 90% of companies grow right now, right? But I think the realization is the false struggle in the sense is it's harder to grow that way now, right? It was
Yeah, it's not
easier at some point.
impossible.
Yeah, like let's be clear. Companies do it all the time, right? All the time, right? But it's harder and it's getting harder to grow
Yes.
this way, which is why you got to get out of it, which is where I agree with you on that mentality and people are getting like fatigued, which is why I'm so passionate now cuz like I finally realized like why I was so fatigued and what stopped growth and why it's been so hard and you said another thing too and why this definition thing matters to me is right? If you're a marketing leader and you're coming in and kind of what I said, where the sales team's already got like five BDRs and five AEs and they're a team of
Hmm.
20, right? Like the model's defined. Whether your company grows that way or not, like you don't have a choice as a marketer. You have to like help that team out, and that because like that's where I'm talking about. Like you have to define how you're going to grow and be very clear about that to everybody, so people know what they're getting into. There's too much like, well, marketing's got to change. Well, you can't change if that's not the company model for growth. All this demand gen talk and all this bullshit and getting inbounds means nothing until you as a company say, well, we have to make some strategic changes with how we're structured, how our team's set up. Like that's why this defining stuff matters to me so much.
Yes.
Yeah. That's that's it. So maybe like I think like one other thing I wanted to like kind of end this with, right, is to really get super actionable to me, which is guys, this is all like great in theory and I've been thinking about this a lot and I think for a company or a marketing leader, like if I was going to do this and try to figure this out, like it's really more about how does a buyer experience our core value? And I really think it starts there. Like, what value do you offer? And how does your buyer experience it? Like, can they experience it or do they experience it through a product led motion, right? Use that led word. I know you think that's a dirty word, but it is part of it, right? Can they or do they experience our core value through marketing, right? Like, is marketing the way we communicate our core value or that point of view, right? Or is it sales? Like, is our shit so complex that sales is required for a buyer to experience our core value? And I think a lot of times what's happening is people want it to be the traditional model. Marketing brings leads, sales gets buyers to experience all the value. And you just got to ask yourself, is that really how our buyers now or in our TAM or in our market experience our core value? And I really think as a company, that's where it starts, or what I would
Yeah.
look at if I was
So,
defining it.
oh yeah. So I haven't heard you talk a lot about that before. I think I follow it, but let me make sure I really get that. So in B2B SaaS, enterprise sales, what is what does it look like that the buyer experiences the value? What do you mean?
Yeah, so I think a great example, like since we mentioned the Refine Labs thing, right? And you mentioned like their point of view and stuff. Like for me, like that's where they showed their value, right? Like there's this demand gen thing. We know how to communicate this. We have the value. What a lot of companies do is they withhold that value, right, to get people to interact with sales almost. And that's or like let's take a different example, Slack, right? Just I'm just throwing out it like you put me on the spot here, Jurgen, and I wasn't ready for this one. But Slack's example, right? Like they believe users experience their value through their product, right? That's how they drive growth. Their goal is to get people into their product as quickly as possible because that's how users experience the value of what they offer,
I
right?
mean,
Like
is
that's
this a conversation back to product led, sales led, marketing led, community led growth then? Is that what this is about for you?
no, I don't. So I would like you have to think about it differently. I don't think it goes to that route. I just think it's more about defining as a company how our buyers can experience the value of what we offer, right?
And you're
And I
saying that that
really,
should be at the core of the growth strategy?
yes,
Got it. Okay.
yes, like essentially, how do our buyers want to experience? Here, I'll give you another example of somebody I've actually advised and worked with, right? Small ACV, right? They had a demo model, sales led model for the longest time, right? They wanted people to experience the value of their product that way. 100%. Like they could not wrap their brain around switching to a new model which would let the products lead the value to get buyers in to experience the value of the product, right? And that's actually in my opinion what blocked their growth from there, which is they could never pivot their mindset to a different model. And I do think it does start with defining one of those three buckets. Do buyers experience our value through product, effective marketing, which does fuel both in some capacity, or sales? Because that's going to change how you're going to structure your entire company. That's going to change how you're going to put your resources as a company, isn't it? Right? Like 100%. Like for me, like the value is 100% marketing, one because of how I offer what I offer and things like that. But you really have to define, like it would be stupid for me to probably go hire two AEs and start doing sales, right? Buyers don't experience the value of what I offer that way. Sure, I could grind it out, but it's not super attractive, but that's what most people start, or they do get one or two, right? It's that example I shared with you, right? Sales quota misquota by 50%. What's the company's answer? we're going to go hire 2 more BDRs.
Yeah, that is an example of where there is clear there's a clear disconnect between, well, going off of that data, as data driven as I am, Jay, I'm all about the spreadsheet, so the data tells me. No, but for real, right? Like if that is indicative of how shit's going over there, then what that would mean is that the buyer gets value in other ways other than interacting with sales, but the
Yep.
company is doubling down on having them interact with sales. In fact, they go to, and this is no knock on BDRs, but they go down to sort of like just conversation opening as opposed to like, well, let's go to like, sales engineers or subject matter experts, or, like they're picking even a specific route within an area that doesn't seem to be in line with how the buyer
Yep.
wants to get the value of the product pre-sale. That's
Yep.
interesting. I'm wrapping my head around this thinking.
Yeah. Well, I know, like I said, this is like we're kind of thinking out in the open here. And like I've talked to so many people now. And to me, that's where it starts, right? And if we want to go, I know we like to try to stop a little earlier. And I think we're always going to go longer than season one, guys, because like there's just so much here to unwrap, in my opinion, right? Which is like if we're going to make this actionable really quick, you kind of define that, right? That's where it starts. Then you do start thinking about where the opportunities are, right? Is it outbound? Is it content? Is it performance, right? That's where word of mouth, right? Like that's where you start thinking about those questions that you need to answer. And then like lastly, like if once you decide that, then you start to look at the channels. You said something when I talked about the refine angle. I want to be very clear that a lot of people miss, right? A lot of companies now are investing in social. Like we want to do this demand thing. Let me be very clear. Social works as a clickbaity thing. That's why Chris's point of view worked. People don't want to admit that type of stuff. And that's where like this focus comes into play and you got to think about and you have to understand this shit like at a deeper level. Like if you're going to pull this stuff off, like it requires that mindset. But then let's say like Refine was a product company, right? And they built this growth lever, right? You could then say, we want our sales team. What are they going to do? We have this growth lever that we know we move. We need to figure out how to integrate them into what's working for us, right? Not have them go do their own little thing. Same with product, right? Like that's where this becomes really powerful is you're all speaking the same language now, right? Like across functions. And this is at least the realization I've had and what we seek to start fixing and really help companies figure out and really like drive that sustainable growth. And that's it. I'm done, Jurgen. I'm done. If you got a final point, go ahead. I'll let you have the last word.
It's Chipotle time. See ya.
Peace.